Tonight we're going to talk a lot about NPM and specifically how it relates to Node. And I put up some code / discussion points at that URL if you guys want to head over to it. You'll find a repository there, and the repository will have some sample code. It'll have a OneNote discussion that we're going to use so that you can ask questions on it. In case you don't want to raise your hand and you're scared to raise your hand, you can collaborate on that OneNote. And I'll use it throughout the duration of the discussion tonight so that we can draw concepts and kind of talk through things. There's also a link to the slide deck if you want to follow along or you just want to look at it. Okay, while you guys are going there, I want to pose a question to you guys. So someone stops you in an elevator and says, "What is Node?" What's your one-sentence response?
JavaScript on the server.
JavaScript on the server, okay.
Who are you?
Who are you? Yeah. Who are you? What else? So JavaScript on the server is pretty good. This is a collaborative thing. So please speak up.
I don't know.
JavaScript
You don't know?
backend?
That's good. Do what?
JavaScript backend?
JavaScript backend, okay. Let me ask a more targeted question. How does Node and how does Chrome relate? Because they both run JavaScript, right? But how are they related?
Nodes run on the V8 server. V8 engine.
Very good. So I like to think of Chrome as something, or a browser, something that speaks HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? And then Node doesn't have the user interface, or it doesn't, when we run it, it doesn't have anything that pops up like a browser, but it definitely speaks one language well, and we've already talked about it, JavaScript, right? And it's typically used for the back end or used to help us build tools. And so tonight we're going to venture down kind of the relationship between Node and NPM, how to create an NPM package, what that means, what are some tricks that you can use, and how this whole NPM thing got started and stuff like that. Yeah?
Could you equate NPM, Node rather, to the same thing, the same function as Apache or Tomcat or SQL Server or something that hosts a website?
Yeah, so there's one thing that's interesting about Node is because it's pretty much a browser with some additional libraries included in it, and one of them is a server, we can make that comparison, right? We can say that Node can be an HTTP server, like something like IIS, Apache, something like that, right? However, it can also not be that, right? Because we can start a Node server and it will listen on a particular port or URL, or we can run something like a tool and make it publish something or deploy something, right? It kind of just depends on what you're doing and things you're doing with it. Now, traditionally, Node usually is used for servers or command line programs, right? So if you're building something like React and you use create React app, right? That's a good example of a Node project.
So you download and install Node and it's running on the host machine, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So typically when you're developing on your Macs, PCs, or whatever, you'll want to download Node and you'll want to install it on your machine. I can show you how to do that quickly, or I kind of assumed you guys knew how to do that, but we can, it's a really easy process. I can show you guys how to do that. So, do people want to see that process? Does anyone want to see how to install Node? Because I shared a code anywhere link inside of my link here. So, and what it does is it'll allow you to follow along with me as I execute commands, and it'll have Node installed already with some code. Okay, so this is kind of what I wanted to talk about. We kind of fit on the first couple pieces. How does Node work? Well, it executes a JavaScript file, right? And that's kind of how we run Node. It's how we tell Node that, hey, this is the script we want to run. Is we say Node and then we say space file name, right? Let me show you what I mean by this. I'm going to hop out to my terminal. I'm only going to spend a little time in my terminal because I'll switch over to the environment that I shared with you all. But I wanted to You getting closer?
That's good.
Okay, cool. All right, so how do I know I have Node installed? If you go to your terminal, and so something like a terminal or your command prompt in Windows, and you just type in node-v, right? That'll spit out what version of Node you're using, right? If you have it installed. If you don't have it installed, it might say command not found Node, and you can go over to Node's website and download an exe or a package and install. When you install Node, after it's done, you'll run this command and it'll kick out that version or some version. It doesn't really matter what version, right? It'll just kick out a version.
Is there a command line update function?
Depends on how you installed Node. So if you installed Node with Brew, you can update it that way. If you did it from the website, you have to just download it every time. If you use a tool like Npm, which is a Node version manager, there is an update command. So it just kind of depends on your machine, proportionally. The easiest is probably just to download it and then update it every time. If you're not a Brew person, that's probably the easiest way.
On your code anywhere, when I try to open it, it says I don't have permission to access.
Let's try to see what's going on.
I think that's specific to you.
No.
No, I'm just kidding.
You should try to get permissions, they're great.
I don't know if this is, I'll go update my repository and push it up. Give me 1 sec. Don't ever do this in production, right? Edit file. I mean, hopefully they're the same. They look the same. Yeah, they look the same. Tried it in class, but that doesn't mean that or somewhere else. But honestly, you can do this on your computers without the environment that I provided. If you have Node installed, you can do anything we're doing tonight and follow along. It's not important to have that environment. I just tried to provide it so if someone didn't have their environment set up, they could follow along as well. You can also, inside of Code Anywhere, you can launch a new Node environment. It's pretty easy to just save file, new connection, and you can create a container, and then you can find Node and this down here. I mean, that's really all I did. I select this, and I said, my Node, whatever. I named it something, and I created it. And unfortunately, I don't have no space, but it's not. If you have a terminal, you're pretty much good, and you can run Node, you're pretty much good. Okay, we're just going to explore this a little bit. So once our terminal gives this version back, that tells us that we have Node installed on our computer, right? In one of our classes, we were discussing what this actually means in the terminal, right? We have all these commands that we can do. And that's probably the hardest thing as a beginner is knowing which commands you can do, what you can't do. And the terminal is always kind of this thing that you have a love-hate relationship with, right? So when we install things in the terminal, like Node, what we're doing is we're teaching the terminal how to execute something, and we're also teaching it a new language almost, if you want to think of it like that, right? So if Node is a program we installed, like if we installed Node, we could teach it how to speak JavaScript, right, by simply typing in Node, and then we get this weird prompt inside of it, right? Does anyone know what this is called?
REPL.
REPL mode. What does it mean?
Read, evaluate, print.
Or like, what's the layman's terms about REPL? What does REPL mean? What does REPL mean to us? Like in layman's terms.
type something in, get something back.
Yeah, like we can do like simple math, right? Or we can create a function like this is super, kind of sucks because it's pretty long, but we can, after we define a function, right, we can execute it, and it just gives us an environment to play around with in Node, right? Now think about this for a second. This environment's giving us a space to type stuff in, right? Like we just wrote a function. It doesn't matter if you're unfamiliar with functions. What we did was we created a function variable, we executed it, and it printed out my name, right? That's cool to do until we restart our computer, or we restart the node REPL mode, and we come back into it, and we say greet. What's going to happen, do you think? Sorry, I should have pushed this. Let me clear. So if I go into node mode and I type in greet, do you think that's going to work? Why not? Yeah, like we've cleared out the memory of our previous execution environment, and we've lost the greet function, or we've lost all the variables from before, right? And that sucks as a developer because, well, if I wrote this super elaborate, beautiful code, I've all of a sudden lost all of that awesomeness that I created, right? And so what we do to fix this, right, is we write our JavaScript in files, and then we tell Node, hey, instead of going into REPL mode, right, why don't you read this file and then execute it? Okay, and why do you guys think that would be good?
It's a lot easier to save things in the file.
Yeah, so it's easier to save in a file, and when, what else? Why else would that be beneficial, do you think?
So it's accessible.
So it's accessible, okay?
Modularize things.
Modularized, right? There's a ton of benefits all over the place. So I wanted to, so if you look at the code on GitHub, I'll just play around with that. Okay, so inside of here, it's, we're not that blind, right?
Nope.
Okay. Inside of this directory, I have a ton of stuff. Yes. Okay, but I wanted to actually make a file inside of my directory here so that I can show you guys how you can execute something like a file, or a script file, and watch what happens inside of Node. Right? So what we want to do is we want to create a file, and we want to use Node to execute the file. Okay? So someone help me do this. So this is what I call, I'm in interactive mode, where I stand at my computer, and you guys tell me what to do. And I'll give you something like an editor. Okay? So let's pretend you have an editor. Doesn't matter what you use. You can use the terminal if you want. It's not really important. Sorry, I didn't do that. I wanted to go into presentation mode. Okay, so this is my, let's create a file inside of my directory here. I'm going to call it blah, just because I like blah, okay? And what I want to do is I want you guys to help me write out hello world to the terminal inside of this file. Okay, so help me write that code. So what do? I just want to write out hello world in my terminal.
Console log hello world.
Okay, console.log. Hello world, right? Now for the interesting part. Wait. How do I execute it? How do I execute this file? It's called blah, and it's inside of this directory right here. See why here?
File name.
So how do I execute this file? I heard it, I think I heard Kevin say that.
Just go to your command prompt, type node, space, and the name of your file.
Okay, so node space, name of file, so it's blah. Do I need the JS?
No,
Yeah.
it assumes it.
Okay, we'll put it there because Ryan, the inventor of Node, recently put out a talk that said he lamented that he took the extension away from files. He said that was one thing he wished to change, right? So what did this do, actually? So let's step back to our previous mode where we wrote some code inside of the REPL. And now what we've done is we've taken this, we've made this blah file, and we've made Node read this file and execute it, right? And what did we get as a result of that? Or what's cool about that?
You run it, you write those down in your console.
Say what?
It's like a save, so you can keep running whatever you have there.
Bingo.
It's not gonna be-
Yeah, it's persisting the code that I wrote, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the other, so if we were to mimic the other code completely, right, and we actually put in a greet function, which I don't want you to get hung up on, but if we made it verbatim the same, right, and then we called the greet function, what this does is it lets us, right, define a function, and then it lets us call the function. Right? And it's cool because we can execute that function by saying blah.js inside of the file, right? And that allows us to write out code and modularize it and do all sorts of cool things. But I thought the talk was about NPM, right? So it is. And this is the point where we leave Node behind a little bit. We talk more about NPM. Okay? So I put up in my slides over here, wherever they are, how do we share code with other developers? Or how do we use code from other developers?
You like get it from GitHub or?
Yeah, so GitHub is one way to do that. What's another way? NPM. Right, so what is NPM exactly? Does anyone, it's not Node Package Manager, though you should pretty much think of it that way, right? But what does it do exactly? You can answer.
Like packages that add functionality to what you're building. So you can get like a whole bunch of packages. Where it's kind of like a personal packages to help you build stuff.
Yeah, so the best way to think of a package is a zip file. You guys all dealt with zip files before? And think of a zip file as, or the stuff in the zip file as a bunch of JavaScript files, right? And what we do inside of NPM is we tie the JavaScript files. We're able to pull them into our project and use them, right? Which is cool. If you do any sort of programming with other libraries, you're always requiring in files or importing them in if you're doing stuff in React. And that's exactly how we share code, right? And we use this website called Npm, I'm going to go over there for a second, to pretty much manage these zip files for us, right? So this is what Npm looks like. They've actually changed it just recently. It used to be more red. The funny part about it is at the top they have this acronym that you can click on, and they just generate out what Npm stands for because, well, everyone thinks it's Node Package Manager, but it probably should have been called JPM, right? JavaScript Package Manager. But really all you need to know is that it's a zip file that when I install it with using some commands, when I install packages, it's going to go out to this website. It's going to download a zip file on my computer. It's going to unzip that file inside of my Node modules folder, which we'll look at here in a second. And then it allows us to require in that library into my project, right? And that's a whole bunch of crazy stuff that we're going to actually look at piece by piece, okay? So I wanted to pose a question of what So why would we want to share these packages with other developers? And I guess a kind of a more advanced question is, what should the smallest size of a package be? And that's a heated topic and a heated debate that left string kind of, or pad left or whatever that package was, kind of messed us over, right? You guys all heard that story. There was a developer who screwed up or removed a package from Npm, so they removed it, and a lot of code depended upon that particular package, and it screwed up the internet for a day or so. So, you know, what's a good size of a package, and when should I decide to share my code, right? And of course, the answer to that always is, well, it depends. Right? So I have a saying inside of our courses at Helio where I say, you know, premature optimization is of the devil, or you shouldn't premature optimize, right? And what I mean by this is, how do you know when you need to make something a package versus not? And my rule of thumb is, if I encounter the need for it a second time, then that probably means I need to turn it into a package, right? And the reason why we're building out NPM packages is because we don't want to duplicate code all over the place. Like, we want to share code that's maintainable, modular. We want to provide to the community a way to test the code if they need to make sure that our code is sound, right? And NPM is literally the glue between Node and this package management system. Okay. When did we get NPM on our machines?
You install Node.
Yeah, so NPM is packaged with Node, right? I'm going to close my emails. And that's too many tabs. Where's my terminal? Okay, so NPM came with the installation of Node, right? And every version of Node that they release, they usually bundle in NPM with the Node executable, right? And so it's an auxiliary program / vocabulary that you teach when you install Node. So if we call Node kind of like a program that executes in the terminal, right? NPM is a program that also executes in the terminal. Now, how is that different from in our applications folder on a Mac or in our program files on a PC? Why is the terminal different than something like that? So how is NPM, I guess, different than Word or Pages or whatever program? Maybe my question's not.
You like, look, it's just because it's a console app and not a...
Yeah, there is no user interface,
Yeah,
right?
it's just, well, there is, it's just a command line.
Yeah, it's the command line, right? So,
Yeah.
which, you know, is kind of scary as a newbie, right? It's kind of scary. But it's also cool because at any given time, anywhere, we can ask it, what do you do? Right? How do I do stuff? And there's a ton of things you can do inside of an NPM. Inside of NPM, these are commands you can execute. Is there any up there that seem kind of interesting to you guys? Any commands up there that's...
There's really on my list interesting, but
Yeah. There's a couple different ones that are interesting for sure. We have our usual suspects of npm start, npm stop, right? And then we have some interesting ones like star and version, dedupe, create, config, right? There's a ton of different commands that you can do inside of npm. So tonight we're going to focus on the basics of it, right? So we're only going to talk about a couple commands: installing, starting, and testing, or test. So start, test, and then we'll also run through this command called init, right? Because what we want to do tonight is we actually want to create an npm package. And so my trick question to you guys is, what files or file is required for an npm package? The bare minimum. Bare minimum.
Config.js?
Package.json.
Package.json, right? So you can have an npm package that just has a package.json file in it, and that would be sufficient. That package probably won't be very useful. It might be, who knows, depending upon what you're doing in it, right? But chances are inside of your package.json file, you're going to kind of want to configure some things, right? So I wanted to walk you guys through, I'm going to do this in a separate directory here, so I'm just going to make a directory. I'll call it npm temp. Put a cd into it. Okay. And then, oops, wait, wrong. Whatever, I won't get tricky. Okay, and what I wanted to do was I wanted to walk through how, so inside this directory there's nothing, right? I wanted to walk through how you create a npm package from scratch, and then kind of digest package.json and the different pieces of it, right? Because those that are beginners right now and are like trying to work up in the industry, the difference between a junior and a mid isn't actually that much, right? Usually it's tooling and usually it's experience, right? And then of course, been around the block a couple times, you might know a couple frameworks here and there. But one of the things that can separate you as someone who's learning JavaScript versus someone who's a junior or a senior is, and some seniors don't even know some of these tricks, is npm is powerful as a build tool, right? It's way powerful. And we used to have tools before that would allow us to build files and or just build things for us. And some of those tools were called Gulp and Grunt, and I don't know where they got the names from. But what happened was, one day someone had an epiphany. They're like, oh, we can do all of this inside of npm, right? And it just, since I became woke up with that, I have used npm as my build system. What do I mean by that? I mean that I deploy my code with npm, I configure things with npm, I do everything inside of my tooling with npm, right? Because it's already there. We don't have to install anything else, so we might as well embrace it. Okay, so this particular directory right now, as we mentioned, it's not an npm package, right? Because we don't have a package.json file. So instead of typing out package.json file inside and out, we can run a command called init. Okay, so what do you think this is going to do for us?
Create a package.json.
Yeah, it's going to create a package.json. Okay, so let's talk about each one of these pieces quickly. So what is this package name, do you suppose? Do what?
It's the name of the package.
Yep. Gotta start slow, right? Name of the package. So can I name this React and publish it? Like so, can I name my package React and try to publish it to npm?
You can try.
I could try, yeah, probably won't succeed, right? Why?
It's already in.
It's already taken. So names are required, right? Or they're required and it's unique. So we'll just
So
keep
what
it.
happens if you do put in React? Does it come back right away and say, does it let you go through the process, or does it come back right away and say that it's taken?
It'll let you go through the process. It just won't let you publish
You
it.
can't publish it.
Yeah.
That makes sense, because that way you don't have to be online.
What happens if you have your own custom package with, let's say, the name React, and then you try to run the actual npm package React? What? Obviously, there'll be some problems.
Yeah. So if you try to, I think what you're trying to ask.
No, not if you're publishing.
Okay.
Just if I'm trying to use.
Let's try it.
Like, well, use it in conjunction with the actual React package, right?
Yeah. Let's try something maybe a little more exotic, like Lodash. Sound good?
Are you running this in a directory where you're going to be creating your app? Is that right?
Yeah. I have nothing in this directory. It's just blank.
Right,
So,
but
yeah.
it's where you would create an app.
Yeah, it's where I would create an app.
Yeah.
And usually when you're building out servers, you probably are going to use a boilerplate or use a template of some sort. This is probably not as, you won't do this probably very often unless you're creating a shared library, right? So it's good though to know kind of the pieces of how to do this, because sometimes you might want to create a shared library, like padding left string or whatever the left string was that broke the internet for a day, right? Like, yeah, left pad or whatever. That particular package was one that someone put a function that padded a string, and then they took it down, and then it broke the internet. And like, people started questioning, you know, when should I make a package? Because that was just a function. Should I just put the actual package inside of my code? And there was this huge debate, and no one really resolved everything. So they just, I don't know. Does anyone know if they resolved it? That was the last thing I heard. Is they just were like, yeah.
Generally, what they disabled is on npm.js. They disabled unpublishing the published version of the package, at which point the left pass problem can't happen. Because if you put it out in the public for the public to use, you, at that point, if you're publishing on npm.js.org, you're essentially saying you have a license to use this in perpetuity. You don't have to rip it out from underneath.
Which makes you feel a little bit safer, or sleep a little bit safer, right?
Right.
Twice before you publish it.
I'm gonna go through the rest of this tutorial really quick. So it asks us to assign a version. I just hit enter, and it assigns defaults, right? The version is, as you release your package, you're going to need to increment the version. They recommend using semantic version. Might talk about that in a different space, because it's something that's also kind of debated, but we've kind of agreed on most of it, of what those numbers in between the dots mean. For now, we'll just use 1.0.0. I'm not going to put in a description. The next one that's interesting is the entry point. Okay? And it's telling me that I should put index.js as my entry point. Okay? So what does index.js do inside of a directory for me? Or what's the significance of index.js, or even index.html, because they're kind of a related topic, why they're named index.
It's the entry point to the application.
Yeah. So it's literally the starting point, right, of the application. So when we named our file blah, that was bad form because, well, that was our entry point, but we named it something that was an index. Right? So here they're saying if you did something like created a file called blah, do you want to use that as the entry point? Right?
So when you hit the URL for what's going to be this app, eventually the very first execution for this app will begin in index, yes?
Yeah, so so pretty much that's the starting point of the app. And you can change it as needed. On top of that, sometimes packages won't start a server or anything. They're just code to share back and forth, right? So it's important to kind of disassociate starting a server with Node and also just sharing code, like create React app, for example, as an example of a Node's command line interface or program. Test command, you can install Mocha or do stuff. I'm not going to put in a Git repo, and as you can see, you can pretty much just hammer the enter key through here, right? I can put my name in here if I want. License, you can put in a particular license. And at the end, it says, is this okay? And it says, yeah, we have to type in yes. And legitimately, that is what our package.json file looks like. Okay? And that's, for the most part, the bare minimum that you need for the package.json. Okay? So let's make sure that it actually created that file. So there's our package.json, right? So there's some interesting things going on inside of this package.json, namely the scripts section, right? So when it asked if we wanted to test code, and we said no, it just generated out this message that said no test specified, exit 1, right? And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to create some scripts, and we're going to mess around with the script section. And then we'll also talk about a couple other sections like dependencies and what that means, right? So if I wanted to run that test command, how would I do that from my terminal here? So,
npm run test.
Yeah, there's npm run test. That's the safest, or one way, or the safest way to do it. right? And it's going to run test, and of course it's going to have an error because, well, we don't have any tests, right? We can also execute that same command by just saying npm test. It's going to also get mad because we don't have anything set up for test yet. And if we try to run the same thing with npm run start, right, it tells us that you're missing the script start. So say you see that message and you open up your package.json file. What is it actually telling you at that moment when it says it can't find the start script?
We haven't written it.
Do what?
We haven't written the start script?
Yeah, we haven't written anything, right?
No file called index.js.
Yeah, we actually have a couple issues here, right? There is no file name index.js. There is no start script. There is no test script, right? So this package is pretty useless. Right, so let's make it a little bit nicer. I'll just crack open code here. You can use whatever editor, doesn't matter. You can even do this inside of, you can edit this inside of text edit, but I would recommend it. I chose to use this editor because, well, it's free and it's pretty good. But so if we wanted to create a test script here, or down here, if we wanted to create a script that is executed when we said npm start, we could provide a property inside of the scripts object, right? That's how developers speaks, right? Or you can just say the string start is assigned, or it's a key value pair. Developers will say that the script object has a start property, and right now it's assigned to an empty string, and that's a mouthful. But pretty much I haven't created a start script at all. So what's going to happen when I run it, do you perceive? Oops, where did it go? So npm start. So it's still saying that I'm missing a script, right? So that's interesting. Because it's there, but it's not doing anything, right? So one thing that it wants to do is it wants to actually execute a command, right? So what if I want to make my computer say something like, I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll try it. This sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. So we're coding on the fly. Why not, right? Did you hear that? Oh. Right. So node packages don't have to be JavaScript, right? The start command can just be something that's proprietary on your machine, right? And that's the beauty of npm. And that's the beauty of why we can take things like this and build tools out of it, right? Because at the end of the day, it's just a tool to help us to set up our packages and whatnot. All right, so
Can I ask a
absolutely,
question?
yeah. There's no lame questions.
Well, earlier, this is taking a step back, but
Sure.
the environment we're in right now, you said that we use Node to run JavaScript basically directly in the terminal. But right now we're using npm. Could you clarify those two, or are you using those two words interchangeably?
Yeah, it's a good question. So thus far so what we've been doing in the terminal has all to do with npm and not a whole lot to do with Node at the moment. The reason why is because we haven't actually executed a Node command yet. You know how my computer just said, hey there? That was using the say program, and then it says the string. Eventually, that's where we actually hook up Node and npm. That's the spot where it'll meet.
And npm is related to that website, or are they also separate?
So think of npm as just like a collection of code, or the possibility to have a collection of code. Its main purpose for when you're developing is to install dependencies. Like when you install stuff, it's going to put things inside of the package JSON. So when I share code with you all, you can get the dependencies that I grab. So that's the relationship. You don't have to run node through NPM, right? I could simply run node. I don't have an index.js file. Let's create an index.js file.
So NPM is kind of, besides a package manager, it's kind of like a startup wrapper. Whatever you want to run, it'll look at the package.json and execute whatever's on your system that you've defined in package.json. So it wraps your startup.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about NPM is it's not tied to Node necessarily. It's installed with Node, and I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure you can install NPM separately, but usually you don't do that, because usually you just want to bring it along with Node, but you don't have to, like we saw with this save command here, you don't have to use Node at all, but typically use it with it. That probably just still doesn't answer your question.
I guess from as a beginner, I'm trying
Yeah.
to know, is this a library? Is it, I understand you saying it's a way that we share code, but right now I'm writing inside of NPM. Like that doesn't make sense to me.
Sure.
Thinking that this is a way to share code, but I'm working with NPM.
Yeah.
Like that's confusing.
So,
And if it's hard to understand, I'm okay not.
no, it's a good question. Does anyone want to help out, maybe explain that? Yeah, go for it.
His first question is, have you used any other package management tools?
Yarn. Isn't that a package manager?
Yarn is based on NPM.
Yeah,
So it's actually backed and powered by NPM. NPM does the download sequentially, so like when you're actually pulling in packages in go in order,
Right.
Yarn does everything at once. So it's slightly faster, but it's still based on NPM, like the package management system. The closest
But I'm not like coding in Yarn. It's an installer tool. The way I
yeah,
look at
if you
it.
use Brew.
I've used
Yeah,
it.
so Brew is for Mac OS, just like NPM is for Node. Is how I like to think about it.
Okay. But I never write any code in Brew. The way he's using his language, he's like writing in NPM. Or did I?
No, he's right, that's JavaScript.
Yeah, he's writing JavaScript
Right.
and then using NPM to execute that.
Okay.
Well,
But
so
no,
it's
no.
like making a brew package. Like it's still the same kind of thing. It's just
It's
it may be more likely to do an
point
NPM
If
package.
you write
What
your
he's
Java-
doing in that scripts directory, in the package JSON, when you write scripts start, that's a command prompt script that's running there. So if you're running on Mac OS or Linux, that's bash that is running there.
Okay.
And if you're running on Windows, you want to write it in such a way that it'll run it in the cmd.exe in our command prompt in your CLI there. And so when you're writing a script like this, you kind of go out of your way to write it in such a way that it'll run on all the platforms that you care about. So one of the ways that you'll do, one of the reasons why Grunt and Gulp and Broccoli and some of these other task managers were popular for a while is it helped to deal with some of the cross-platform issues. When running scripts directly in NPM became popular, people went, wait a second, we already have Node and JavaScript. We can just start a JavaScript file and it'll do whatever we want it to do. This is similar to Java's Maven or Gradle, but there's nothing about NPM that forces you to even use JavaScript here. You're downloading, so there's a lot of this that goes in, but the scripts here in particular is about running code that you're using to set up your project in various ways.
So one thing that might be a little bit confusing here is that in this package JSON file, we haven't gone to the actual core part of what this config file does, which is manage the dependencies. So there's a dependencies section that tells you all the packages that you are downloading from NPM. And it keeps those in the right versions and those things. The scripts and everything else you see here, a lot of metadata, the scripts help you kind of run things beforehand or after or whatever, like starting the app or testing. So there's a lot of things that you can do with NPM that help you, but the core piece is managing packages. And that's the part that you're not seeing. So that
Yeah,
So it's going to make sure your environment's set up. It's going to execute the command, node, node mod, whatever it's going to be. It runs the actual code, and they'll do the cleanup.
So in a way, like the NPM website is a global version of it. This, when you say I'm using NPM, you're talking more like locally, this is what I'm going to need, and I'm building this, and then it will be executed by Node to build my application.
Not exactly.
Not exactly.
The website is a repository. It's a directory of possible packages that can be downloaded.
Right.
And they can be downloaded by Garlick or NPM.
Right.
Or if you wanted to like use curl and manually put in all the commit, like you could do that.
Yeah.
It's a server that provides packages in a specific way.
Right.
Whereas NPM, the client, is all about building package JSON, managing dependencies, and running scripts. You can run your own private NPM repository.
Right.
That's probably a topic for another day. But
I think that makes sense. Because like in my head, they're separated, right? In a sense, like you have the internet version, which is being managed for everybody, and we can all access it. But like right now, we're writing something that may eventually go up there, but we're going to use to build our own apps. It's managing all our own internal dependencies. Is that correct?
Would you say it's fair to draw the comparison between like your Git local client and GitHub? So similar to how you can set up a Git repository server, it's not actually the client you're using locally, but you're using like it's not a it's like an apples to oranges, but they're both fruit.
it's not like there's. I see what you're getting at.
Yeah.
But Git locally is a little bit more like GitHub than NPM
versus like NGS.
Yeah.
But they are sort of separated in a sense, like NPM locally versus NPM the website.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One's a client and the other's a server.
Right. Okay.
So when you run an NPM command, is it doing anything with Node, or is it running because of Node?
It's not, so it's not doing anything right now with Node at all.
Well,
but we will make it do something.
You have to have Node to run NPM then.
NPM runs in the V8 engine, doesn't it? Or doesn't it use the-
I want to say
NPM runs on Node.
Yeah.
you can install
NPM is a
NPM
Node
separately,
package,
but
you
that
can install
might
it
be a
as a
lie.
Node
So
package.
I'm going to say that they're usually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So if you don't have Node on your system, you won't run NPM.
But there's not very many use cases of using NPM without Node, correct?
Okay, so it's kind of a moot
Yeah,
question.
they're kind of coupled, right? And I'm taking you through really just playing around with things. We're going to start using it here in a second with dependencies, and I hope it makes a little more sense.
Yeah, sorry to slow us down.
No,
It's helpful to know like what environment I'm working
it's probably one of the hardest concepts to understand as a new JavaScript developer, right? Like, honestly, yeah. So I wanted to quickly show you what happens if you npm install something by installing a package that my buddy wrote. Does anyone know Jason Towner? He works at Jane. Yeah.
Yeah, Towner's a friend of mine.
Yeah, he made this package called Ice Ice Baby. It's amazing because it does pretty much nothing, but yeah, he's pretty funny. So when you install a package, I did something bad actually, and we're gonna see what I did bad here in a second. Actually, maybe it's not bad what I did. Notice that my package JSON file now has this dependency section down here, right? And what that's telling me is a couple things. One, that if I share this package with anyone else, when they npm install it, it's going to pull down Jason Towner's awesome package, right? And it's going to put it inside of a special directory that just showed up also called node modules. Okay, so I'm going to go into node modules here for a second and just look. And notice that inside of node modules, there's Ice Ice Baby, and it has, if we go into Ice Ice Baby, there's actual code inside of there. And the reason I pulled up this package is because it's pretty simple, right? There's an index.js file like we would have. There's a package.js file, right? And he published this file as a joke, honestly. I'm not sure what he was doing when he published it, but it's a package you shouldn't use, which brings me to the last point of how do you know when to use a package versus not, right? So he really
This is really just a joke.
When you install dependencies, it unzips it in the node modules folder, and then I can go inside of my code and require things in, right? And honestly, we only have a couple of minutes left, so I wanted to just ask any questions, open it up to you guys. I also wanted to not leave you hanging with hooking up Node into it, right? So if we had actually hooked up Node, we'd probably see that inside of the start command, right? The period says to execute the directory we're in, right? And it'll use index.js. And if we ran this command now, it should read us, you guys go back a couple directories. Right, it should, so hi from index.js, right? That's typically how your packages will work. If you're starting up something or you're testing something, you'll hook up Node into these scripts, and really you're managing dependencies in this file, right? You really shouldn't mess with the dependencies unless you know what you're doing. Just let npm do its thing. Never edit code in the node modules folder, because that's meant for code that's being downloaded and unzipped. If you make changes and you install it, it's going to overwrite stuff. So don't mess around with that. And then I just wanted to open it up if you have any questions or comments. Inside of the OneNote that I opened up here, where did it go? Here. I put a link in the repository I shared with you guys. This is what I was going off of tonight. We didn't get to the pre and post scripts, which are kind of cool. But if you write questions inside of here, I'll typically respond to them because I get notified. This is the tooling we use inside of our course as we instruct. So usually what I do is I'll come over here and say questions, and then I leave it open to you guys so you can collaborate on this file, hopefully. I think I gave you guys edit access. And that's all I got.